The main purpose of this video is to compare the two types of cell division we have studied in this class, mitosis and meiosis. And we're going to do so by commenting on the parts where these two processes are going to be similar, but also talk about the differences in an effort to help you eliminate any possible misconceptions you may have about mitosis and meiosis. So let's begin by recognizing that both of these types of division begin with a cell, a parent cell, and this parent cell, we can see a representation of it in the middle of this illustration on the slide. This parent cell has the complete number of chromosomes that we recognize as diploid. 2n is two sets of chromosomes. When you have two sets of chromosomes in a cell, that is because one set has been inherited from the father and the other set has been inherited from the mother. Where the two processes are also similar is that these cells are made following the stages of the cell cycle. There's been a G1, an S, a G2. In the S of interphase, chromosomes were duplicated. But now the main difference is where these cells are located. So the diploid cell that participates in meiosis is going to be located in the sex organs of an individual, of an organism. And so if you want to be more specific, in the female organism is going to be in the ovaries, in a male organism is going to be in the testes. Whereas the process of mitosis will be taking place in just about any cell that makes up part of the body. And so that is one key difference. Meiosis will only take place in the reproductive organs, testes and ovaries of organisms. But if you think about all of the other tissues and organs making up the body of an organism, if they are going to undergo, those cells are going to undergo cell division, it's going to have to be mitosis. And now we're going to be seeing a lot of differences. One of those is going to be the number of divisions. Mitosis requires only one round of cell division. We go through the stages of mitosis once, prophase, followed by a pro-metaphase, then we have a metaphase, then we have an anaphase and a telophase. And when telophase ends, you're going to have two daughter cells, each containing a diploid number of chromosomes, just like the original parent cell. Notice also that these cells are going to be made by having exact copies of the chromatids deposited into each of the two daughter cells. Consequently, the daughter cells made in mitosis are going to be genetically identical to the parent cell that began the process. And that is not going to be the case in meiosis. Meiosis is different because although we began with a diploid cell, as you know, meiosis will be reducing the number of chromosomes in half. So that by the end of telophase 1, there's going to be only half a number of chromosomes. Ploidy is going to be N or haploid. We began with a diploid cell, but by the end of meiosis 1, cells are only haploid. In this illustration, we began with a cell that has 4 chromosomes. You can still see the 4 chromosomes arranged as tetrads, but then by the end of meiosis 1, there's going to be only 2 chromosomes in each of the cells. Therefore, these cells are only haploid. The process is not done yet, because as you recall from the previous video, each chromosome still consists of the 2 sister chromatids that resulted from the chromosome duplication in the S stage of interphase. Now meiosis 2 has to come and separate the 2 sister chromatids from within those cells. And the outcome is going to be 4 daughter cells. At the end of meiosis 2, we have 4 daughter cells. These cells are not going to be genetically identical to the original cell because now they only have half the amount of genetic information, but they have also undergone events like crossing over and independent alignment or independent assortment of chromosomes. And for those reasons, these cells are not going to be identical. So think about the key differences that are featured in this table. Both begin with a diploid cell that has gone through the cell cycle, but the location of these cells are going to be different. Then mitosis requires only one round of cell division. Meiosis requires two rounds of cell division. Another important difference between mitosis and meiosis is with regards to the uses of the cells that are being made by these two processes. If we focus first on mitosis, we're going to see that mitosis helps organisms that have suffered an injury replace cells that were lost through that injury or became damaged and eventually need to be replaced. Mitosis, the division that produces more body cells, is also going to be responsible for the growth of multicellular organisms. If you think about you and I, we began our life with just one cell, the zygote, which is a fertilized egg. And from that point till the point we are right now, we have approximately 40 to 60 trillion cells on average, and that is a lot of cells. And so we have built our bodies thanks to the process of mitosis that along the way throughout our development has been adding more and more cells. So mitosis helps with growth. Another contribution of mitosis is for organisms that do not have a sexual life cycle, but have an asexual life cycle. Remember that the key detail about asexual reproduction is not whether or not partners or mates are participating. The thing about asexual reproduction is that it doesn't require sex cells. So you may ask, well, how can an organism reproduce without sex cells? Well, the answer may be relatively simple, and it's just by making more cells. Here in this illustration, for example, you can see an organism known as a hydra, and this hydra lives in aquatic environments. It has a cylindrical body, so the animal here is like laying on its side a little bit. There's going to be a mouth over here. These are going to be tentacles that hydra used for capturing prey, but instead of producing sex cells and using those for making the next generation, what hydra can do is induce cells on the side of the body to begin to multiply, forming at first what may look like a tumor, like a bump on the side of the body. But that growth and the multiplication of cells continues until eventually you can begin to recognize that a new organism, just like the parent, is forming. We can now see in this illustration that there is a cylindrical body, there's going to be a mouth, which is surrounded by the tentacles that this new hydra will be using for capturing its own prey, its own food. And so notice that in this description that I'm giving you, at no point sex cells were needed, only mitosis, cell division for making more cells and more cells and more cells and more cells and more cells until eventually this little bud of a hydra has enough to remove itself to self-clip from the parent, and in most of the cases they're going to be living where they're close to the parents that produce them by asexual reproduction. And like this hydra, there's going to be many organisms that live in the ocean to do the same thing, including various kinds of worms. Also, the corals of a coral reef are examples of organisms, like in the case of animals, that reproduce asexually. In the case of plants, you can do asexual reproduction, starting with just a leaf or a piece of a stem, or sometimes even a piece of a root. And then you can make new organisms without the need of sex cells. That is what mitosis would do. Meiosis, on the other hand, is going to be responsible for the making of the sex cells that participate in sexual reproduction. And what do we have in this illustration? Well, just a typical case of sexual reproduction we can see in animals. There's some mating happening with these frogs. Females are the larger ones in this species. They need a larger body to house the eggs, which, by the way, they can produce on a single reproductive season up to 20,000 eggs each frog. That is a lot of meiosis, I want to tell you that. But it's nothing compared to the number of sex cells made by the males, which are usually smaller. And so in their mating, they're usually going to be the joining of the two of them. There is no copulation taking place here. Simply, the eggs are being fertilized outside of the bodies of these organisms. So meiosis is the type of division responsible for the making of sex cells. Additionally, meiosis contributes to maintaining a constant number of chromosomes in a species generation after generation. Think about what would happen to us, humans, if meiosis didn't cut the number of chromosomes in half. If the sperm produced by a man had 46 chromosomes and the egg produced by a woman also had 46 chromosomes, the next generation will be made up of organisms or offspring where their cells are going to contain 46 plus 46. That is going to be a total of 92 chromosomes in their cells. And when that generation grows up and reproduces sexually, and their eggs of the women contain 92 chromosomes and the sperm of the men contain 92 chromosomes, they will end up producing a generation where their offspring will have 184 chromosomes in their cells. And with each generation, the number of chromosomes will continue to double. Well, don't worry, this is not going to happen thanks to meiosis, which cuts the number of chromosomes in half. See, in our bodies, we have cells with 46 chromosomes. And when meiosis cuts the number of chromosomes from 46 to 23, 23 in the sperm, 23 in the egg, the two of them are going to join at fertilization, then that restores the diploid number of chromosomes in our cells, which is going to be 46. So this reduction of chromosomes in half helps ensure that the number of chromosomes in a species remains constant generation after generation. And just as important as the previous two, meiosis is also responsible for increasing genetic diversity in all of the species that have a sexual reproductive cycle. Gametes, like eggs and sperm, will be made by the process of meiosis. In most cases, there will be exceptions, but we're going to save those for Bio 212 and Bio 213 when we talk about reproductive strategies of animals and plants as well. So what can you do to help keep track of all these similarities and differences? Well, you can make a table like the one I'm using in this slide, and you can simply go on and write in there the information that pertains to both mitosis and meiosis. And so I'm going to use my annotation feature on my tablet to write some data here. For example, mitosis. How many divisions are needed for mitosis to be completed? You're correct. There's only one. What about meiosis? How many rounds of cell division are needed for mitosis to be completed? Yeah, you're correct again. It's going to be 2. The number of cells produced through the process of mitosis. We begin with one parent cell. It's a diploid cell found anywhere in the body where cells are being produced. And the number of daughter cells is going to be 2. Well, how about meiosis? Meiosis required 2 rounds of division from the one cell. It's a germ cell. It's a type of a diploid cell, but it's only housed in the reproductive organs of sexually reproducing organisms. And so how many cells are made at the end of meiosis? Correct. The number is going to be 4. So we can continue with this exercise, and I recommend that you can maybe make a table similar to this one as you are studying on your own, and then compare the information you're reviewing, remembering with what you have in your notes, what you've learned in these videos, and also from reading the textbook. But let's continue. The genetic makeup of the daughter cells. They are going to be identical to each other and to the parent cell that produced them. And as you can imagine, writing on the screen is not the easiest thing. My handwriting is not this sloppy, well, not usually. What is the genetic makeup of the daughter cells made in meiosis? Well, they are going to be genetically diverse. With regards to one another, and also in comparison to the cell, the germ cell that began the process of meiosis. What exactly is separated in mitosis during anaphase? In anaphase, sister chromatids are going to be separating. How about meiosis? Sister chromatids are separated not until meiosis 2. So let's begin with meiosis 1. In meiosis 1 is going to be homologous chromosomes. And this is in meiosis 1. And sister chromatids are eventually separated in meiosis 2. Crossing over, independent assortment. Where do these events happen? Never in mitosis, but absolutely yes in meiosis. Do you remember when crossing over takes place? If you answered prophase 1, you're correct. How about independent assortment? Not in prophase. Independent assortment happens in metaphase 1. And for the purpose of division, you can comment on what mitosis is for growth, for healing, for asexual reproduction. Meiosis is going to be useful to provide the sex cells that are required for sexual reproduction, helping maintain the constant number of chromosomes in a species, and also for increasing genetic diversity of species that are reproducing sexually. That should cover the main points that help us compare mitosis versus meiosis. I hope that you are making good progress towards understanding these two forms of cell division.